Hi, my name is Chitra and welcome to A Reclamation of Soul. A Reclamation of Soul is a framework that I created around the process of choosing joy as internal liberation. If my previous video were my personal reasons as to why I'm choosing joy, this video contains a video essay around the cultural and societal importance around choosing joy for our collective liberation. I find that the ethics of liberation and serving the community is something that I'm very comfortable with. But over the last 2 years, I've realized that I have no idea how to choose joy. I have no idea how to choose joy. And I feel like all of my communities, all of which are people of color, marginalized people, or immigrants, a lot of us do not know how to choose joy, very simply because our existence in this country is one that is rooted in survival mode. My family has received all of the material trappings of this world by living in survival mode, and yet my family deeply struggles with receiving. My family deeply struggles with joy and believing that they deserve to exist simply because they do. And I no longer want to live like that. I believe our liberation is directly tied to our fear of death. And I think the best way that I can explain this truth to you is with a video essay that I made a few months ago. This video essay focuses on an incident that happened at the Met Gala this past year where Shah Rukh Khan, a very famous Bollywood actor, was not recognized at the Met Gala by Teyana Taylor and Ego Nwodim. It caused a lot of backlash. I can see where the argument is coming from, that people are disappointed that Shah Rukh Khan wasn't more recognized. When you look at somebody who has such a global presence like that, and they come to America, which has been sold as like the biggest stage in the world, and like you haven't made it unless you've made it in America. And for somebody like that to not even be recognized is, I get it. I get that that's frustrating. It definitely stems from a deeper need to be seen and validated by the Western world as a result of colonization. But then some of the videos that I've seen in response from Black and Latin creators have been really crazy. I've been seeing a lot of videos where people are like, Indian folks should spend more time trying to dismantle the caste system than commenting on stuff like this, which is just such a like insane thing to say. And I also understand where that frustration came from, right? It was an event centered around Black history and Black fashion and art. Just two different expressions of the same core pain around visibility in the Western world, around wanting understanding without having to consistently prove that you deserve it, without having to defend anything. I find this scenario was the strongest example of how the fear of death shows up in the small moments. Arguably, if you go back and watch this video, it really should not have mattered so deeply. A reclamation of soul is really an exercise in how to extend that radical self-acceptance to ourselves, instead of desperately hoping that the systems that we exist in will ever give that to us. Over the last couple of years is really when I've started to delve into Black radical feminist writings, reclamation of identity through like a soul lens. I am an artist, obviously, first. A big struggle that I found with my people, or just art in general and Hollywood in general, has just been this like massive lack of authenticity. A lot of Black artists just have such a sense of soul. I believe that having that very black and white separation between the oppressor versus you as the oppressed allowed for an opportunity to retain a strong sense of cultural identity. So at the very least, around your people, you could be yourself. You would remember who you were. I honestly feel like my people were told by the colonizer that we were worth just enough. That if you put your head down and you're a good little slave in a different way, you too can have the life that we live. When your belonging is all tangled up in other people's validation, the self-abandonment becomes a daily choice. You trade what you really want for survival. It's very easy to self-abandon when you're disconnected from your community, from your identity, from all of the customs and traditions that you were raised around. That is the reason why I think the Black community are often mimicked and copied in the way that they are, is because a lot of people are so moved by that authenticity and they want it. And it's almost like you feel like you can study it without the understanding that that kind of authenticity is embodied. That kind of authenticity only comes from soul. And to reconnect with soul, you have to do the uncomfortable looking around where you've betrayed yourself for belonging. I created a reclamation of soul to guide myself away from the self-abandonment. And it's just the start of the journey. Obviously, this work is hefty and deep, but I just feel like we're deserving of lightness. We're deserving of play, even in the reclamation, even in the healing. I've spoken about my relationship with my father many times on this app. A big part of me wanting to go to India as well was to understand him. When I met up with him in India, it became very clear that this man has never released himself from the shackles of survival. He has fought, clawed his way, like from a small village, into living this incredible life in the US. Everything that he's wanted, he has achieved in his lifetime. And yet he refuses to allow himself an ounce of ease, an ounce of peace or joy or relaxation, probably because he believes he doesn't deserve it. He's never practiced that. When he came to India, the thing that we did was go look at end-of-life housing together. Like, how do you even address something like that? You know, how do you tell people who have everything, who have the big house, the fancy car, who get to put their kids through school without any student loans, who get to put food on the table for their family every day? How do you tell them that you sacrifice soul to do this? That you sacrificed your joy, that this is not what life is really meant to be about? They're safe, they're secure. Why upend that just for something as luxurious and silly as joy? I think I just in particular have the audacity that I want all of the material trappings of this world, also demand joy and demand respect and freedom, and not have to live my life with guilt and shame. I think that is an audacious thing to demand. There was this article that was released on like The Guardian or something many years ago. It was said in this article that in the United States, people smile at each other in order to indicate that they're not a threat. I just think that that is like the most insane, also makes like so much sense, simply because we cannot trust each other at face value. This community trust is actively undermined by the lack of community ethics. I was raised in Silicon Valley, right? And so I grew up around very competitive kids of color. I just saw how deeply the fracturing of community trust went. It was exacerbated by the environment around us. Like when you're surrounded by all these like tech giants, like all these incredibly prestigious schools, there was this incredible pressure that you had to make it at the highest level, otherwise you literally wouldn't survive. I think that same kind of mentality has followed its way into the creative community in the industry that I'm in right now. There is this undercurrent of competition, there is this undercurrent of only I can succeed, there is only room enough for one of us. And that is something that I need that to die. There have been many times where people I've considered very close have deeply betrayed me. Ultimately, I think I've been able to bounce back from the understanding that them lashing out at me or punishing me is simply a fear of death. It's simply a fear of death. See, this is how colonization really works. It forces us into survival and makes us believe that working with each other is more dangerous than following the rules that have been set for us. I believe the only way to curate community ethics is to really get very clear on what our personal ethics are. And I think to do that is to go through the reclamation of soul. I think connecting back to ourselves, connecting back to play, childhood, the things that make us happy is what will allow us to work towards liberation in a way that actually sustains itself. When you hear things like joy or play or creativity, it just feels like stickers, that you would find in a kindergarten classroom. I kind of looked at people who chose joy as sort of choosing to be ignorant. Like they didn't want to pay attention to what was wrong in the world because there's so much wrong in the world. My college experience was like extremely clarifying, if not extremely traumatizing for me. I was raised in the Bay Area, and so I grew up with a very specific kind of ethic, one that put social justice, equality, and diversity at the forefront. And for college, I went to a predominantly white theater program in the Northeast in Boston. It was the first time in my life that I've ever been the only South Asian, ever. I had a movement coach in college who was so adamant about joy. And he would start every class literally being like, joy, this day is amazing, and cheesecake, I love cheesecake because cheesecake brings joy. And I found myself getting really frustrated, actually, because all of my classmates were like parroting this joy. And I was like, it honestly feels like I'm fighting so hard just to be seen. My other classmates of color are fighting so hard just to be seen or accepted without being labeled as like bullies or too much or outcasts. How can we be talking about joy in this kind of a context? After going through the reclamation of soul, I think I came to the understanding that the people who choose to live from real joy, like soul-embodied joy, are people who deeply understand pain. They understand that joy is a choice that has to be made. Nobody's going to give you your joy. Nobody's going to tell you that now is the time for you to be free. You simply have to take it. A reclamation of soul is not healing in the sense it's ethics development. Joy without ethics becomes colonization. And Ethics with no joy becomes suppression. I have been in this Reclamation of Soul journey for about 2 years, since October of 2024, when I did my villain challenge, which was a creative course to reconnect me with my inner villain. And that basically asked me to look at a lot of personal, cultural, and familial shame. I ended up going back to Kerala to reconnect with my father's side of the family, unlearn a lot of shame that I held there, reconnect with my heritage, and my why as an artist. I've come to the conclusion that if I really want the life that I want, which is joy, rest, ease, and reciprocity alongside the material trappings of this world, I need to practice joy as an ethic, just as much as I practice the ethics of liberation and I practice giving back to the community. I have to practice receiving, I have to practice holding my joy. And I find that as a collective as well, we have to develop the emotional capacity to really hold the liberation that we are really calling in. And that starts with yourself, right? Liberation does not begin out in the streets. Liberation begins at home, right here, in the daily choices, in the small moments every single day.